How's everybody doing?
Good.
Let me see how this is going to work. It's not. Okay. We'll put this over here. We don't need that anyway, right?
Podium?
We'll see how it goes. I've got a lot of my notes right here with scripture on them. If I need it, we'll get to it. Or if I got to get into something else, we'll open it up like that. Y'all had a stool. That's great. I brought one with me. It made it in. And then we realized there was one up here, so we took it back out. But thank you all for having a stool. As Jake says, my name's Darren. It's my wife, Gina. We come to you on a special occasion. This is actually our wedding anniversary, believe it or not. Yeah, so. And,
how many years?
All of them.
All the years.
I think we're married 36 years. Yeah.
We're applauding the fact that you got the question right.
I tell you what, it's, I'm 56 now, and you go to the restaurant, and when you're up to the counter, and they give you the seniors discount.
You take it.
Yeah, you do. But it started happening to us probably 2 or 3 years ago.
Because you had gray hair.
But I didn't have that much gray. It's gotten worse. Like it's doing two things. It's graying really quick and it's disappearing. So there's not really much left. It's held on in the front, so I'm okay. It's just whenever I turn around, it's kind of the Jewish thing backwards, that little hat over there, kind of like that. But we did this thing over to Glencoe there about the kingdom. And Ethan and you guys were kind enough who come to that to put up with me for a week talking about those things. And this was part 2. And, right off the bat, you're going to see the screen and you're going to wonder, how is that even connected to the kingdom? I really think it is in a lot of ways. But let me try to explain how I got here to study this part. And first of all, I'm not an expert in this, okay? Neither am I an expert in the kingdom. Still got, with all that stuff, you're always working on, as long as you're studying, you're working to sort things out. But basically, when I went to school at Sunshine School of Evangelism back in, say, 2001, 2, 3, something like that, right in there. It's when they were out 4, maybe something like that.
Graduated in May of 2004.
In May of 2004, I graduated from there. At the time, Dave Fagan was a professor there. And I don't know, does any of you guys know Dave or remember Dave? I know a couple of you guys do. Okay. Well, Dave had done a lot of study on the tabernacle. And it had really helped him put a lot of different things together. But he was able to see that tabernacle in so many things in the New Testament that really I didn't see before that. Because I never had studied the tabernacle, other than I knew the tabernacle existed, that kind of thing, and I knew about the temple, but that was about my extent. So I couldn't exactly put together, whenever he first started talking about stuff. We actually, believe it or not, the first class I ever took was a class on the Book of Revelation, and that's what had my interest spurred. I heard they were going to do it, a night class. It was going to be a 2-hour class once a week, and it was going to last all year. And, I said, well, I'm going to go up to that class, because at that time, I was really working on the kingdom, and I kind of felt how that fell together. And the first thing he started with was in chapter 1 of Revelation was that Jesus was dressed in. And he was talking about the fact that he was dressed in this white. And what he pointed out to us, he said, that's the high priest on the Day of Atonement, is what the high priest will wear. So that was really like a mystery to me, because I didn't know anything about that. And I walked out of that class that night. There was about 4 of us rode up together. And that's basically what he had talked about, is he was doing a comparison to the high priest on the Day of Atonement. And where am I allowed to set this?
Anywhere you want. That's a nice...
I don't feel comfortable, man. I don't feel comfortable there. Y'all use this?
We'll bear with you.
No, not there.
No, no. We went home that night. I remember that well. Like, this is crazy. I don't know where he's going with this. And we're in like the first lesson, and we all had our own thoughts about stuff. And it wasn't like we really knew anything, but we just trying to put this thing together. And he's going to come at it some other odd direction that we're not even familiar with. Whenever we went to that class back in that time. And I'm trying to put the kingdom stuff together. Everything's falling together at that time for me on that part. And I'm trying to, look at that. And here's this book, and it's got all these symbols in it, and I don't understand it. And Dave is not going to connect it together. He's going to show us how the tabernacle fits into it. And, surprisingly enough, there's a lot of tabernacle imagery all through that book. And if you know something about tabernacle, you can kind of start picking it out. But if you don't, it's kind of hidden in there. And so Dave was extremely good in Greek. And I say that because I didn't know any Greek. So he was constantly taking a marker and, writing Greek on the board as if we knew what those, he was writing Greek in Greek, okay? And we never had Greek for. But he was good enough at presenting that information that you come out of there still knowing something. Even though you didn't know Greek, he was good enough at presenting that you kind of felt that. So it really spurred an interest. And then, there was just some stuff about that we kind of hit that I kept running, later in studies. We would hit this with the Day of Atonement. And I know a little bit about the Day of Atonement. I don't know if you do or not, even know what I'm talking about. But there was some things in Scripture that seemed to allude to that. And it was like, what does that mean and stuff? And you try to start putting a timeline. Well, through that you started doing your own tabernacle stuff. You start teaching at church. And I believe that this group has all been through some kind of tabernacle study. Am I saying that correctly? Yeah. In fact, I should have brought that tabernacle model back down here just so we could put it up and display it. Some glue with that would help. But whenever we did that, the tabernacle, you kind of learned the order of it, the size of it, and what they did on certain times. And in that study was definitely the Day of Atonement. We talked a lot about the Day of Atonement in that study because it is so central to the tabernacle. Well, what I later found out is what I really didn't realize, and that was all these feast days that the Jews celebrated. And these feast days seemed to center around the tabernacle and later the temple, but they all had a part of that right there. And it was like, man, this picture is much bigger than I ever give it credit for. And then you start seeing those things alluded to in the New Testament that have something to do with those feast days, but you can't see them because you don't know what they are. But let me give you a quick example that I'd run through 100 times. When the day of Pentecost had fully come, that's part of a feast day right there. Now, it's not alluding to in the sense of pointing something else out. It was a direct, statement right there in Acts chapter 2, but it was particularly pointing out when this particular feast day was fully come. And what else I'll find out, and I'll get ahead of my notes, and I don't know, we haven't got all that figured out. I know what I like to get done each night, but we'll see how it goes. What else I didn't realize was that there seemed to be something happening here with Jesus that seemed to match up with these things. It wasn't like that they were just random, because strangely enough, if you really paid attention all the way back in the Scripture that we'll look at later, in Deuteronomy 16:16, I found out that God had said 3 times a year the Jewish males were to appear back to a place where he appointed. Now that would end up being Jerusalem, where the temple is. That's where they're going to come to, is where the temple is. But it would turn out, that these times they're coming back are going to be, and I feel like I'm ahead of myself, but that's okay, Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles. That's the 3 feasts that they were to appear at where God had told them to appear. So where that gets to be significant is whenever you realize that God was bringing all these Jews back together at particular times that major things was going to happen. You think about it. What happened at Passover? You guys know. Jesus was crucified during Passover. What happened at Pentecost? Okay, well, you guys know what happened at Pentecost. That's the start of the church. So, it wasn't like, and did you notice that Luke actually records in the book of Acts in chapter 2 that people were there from all over the world? You remember that? There's a whole recording of names that we have a little bit trouble saying sometimes because they're places that we don't go to. And it's like he's showing all these people are there. And at first glance, you'll be like, oh, there's all kinds of nations represented. Well, yes, there is, but there's not. There's just Jewish people that came back from all over the world. Did they necessarily speak the same language? Nope, they didn't speak the same language because some was from over here in Egypt, some was from Ethiopia, and they all travel down here and get here to Jerusalem. So whenever you hear that speaking, whenever they're speaking in tongues, and if you watch that real close, that's other languages is what that is. But, and that's told us really simple whenever one of them says, how do we hear in our own tongue or language wherein we were from, seeing that these are from where? Galilee. They knew. Like, these guys are from Galilee. How are we understanding them? How are they capable of speaking in all these languages? So, you start seeing how God brought these people together for these major events in time and history. So, we're going to look at some of that. And most of this, what we're going to deal with, is found in Leviticus chapter 23. Now, if we went to Leviticus 23, and we went to verse 3, which is out of order with what you got, I know it is, so hang on here for a second. Now, my goal is this, guys, in this class. I don't want this, if I can avoid it, to be some kind of presentation that I do. Okay? In other words, I really, 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 if I can change it to a classroom where you guys are interactive with me, it'll make me so happy. And if I can't, well, I can't. But I know it's like you get in this room and you think, the person up here speaks and we listen. I do so much better. If you don't, if there's something you're not understanding or something, there's really not a dumb question. If anybody ever asked a dumb question, it was me. I've asked more dumb questions than anybody else, so I top the list of that. So don't worry about those dumb questions. Can I answer every question you'll answer? Now, that doesn't make any sense at all. Can I answer every question you ask? The answer is no. There's plenty of stuff I can't answer. Ethan's over in the corner. We'll check with him. Jake's up here at the front. We'll check with him. And, I'm just saying that, I'm not going to sit here and try to make up something, guys, just to give you an answer. That's not worth anything to any of us. So I won't do that. But I do want to take a look at this in Leviticus chapter 23. And tonight, especially, as we start this off, I want us to go to verse 23. So can I get somebody to read verse 3 for us in chapter 23?
I'll do it. For 6 days work may be done, but on the seventh day there is a Sabbath of complete rest, a holy convocation. You shall not do any work. It is a Sabbath to the Lord in all your dwellings.
Okay, we're going to there's 2 or 3 things in there I'd like for you to understand better, but we're not going to do that tonight. We're going to look at that holy convocation, and we're going to understand that better. But for this, one of the first things that's mentioned in this chapter that is about what's called the 7 Feasts of Israel. Now remember this, the Israel celebrated more feasts than 7, even in the time of Jesus. And we'll take a look at that tomorrow night, is the plan. But the feasts that God set apart for them are found in this particular chapter right here, buried in Leviticus, the book none of us like to read. The one that looks like the most boring book on the face of the earth, he stuck these feasts in here. Now, I've been told that actually the Jewish children love this book, especially the boys. They like to memorize Leviticus. I thought that's really different because, it's like most people tell me they like to skip this book right here, right here, because they get into all those rules and regulations. Well, you notice what it's talking about here. It's talking about the Sabbath. Now, let's go back, and now we will look at a couple of verses here. Genesis chapter 2, verse 2. And I wanted to go through these a little bit quick here so that we could get them all in. So let me just say, by the 7th day, God completed his work which he had done, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had done. So that's the first time we see something maybe alluding to this 7th day and resting right there, found right at the beginning of the Bible. Now over in Exodus in chapter 35 in verses 2 and 3, this is more to do with the time whenever the law was being put in place and given to Moses here. For 6 days work may be done, but on the seventh day you shall have a holy day, a Sabbath, a complete rest to the Lord. Whoever does any work on it shall be put to death. You shall not kindle a fire and in any of your dwellings on the Sabbath day. Okay, so there we kind of see it where God kind of brings it out, and there, you know, we're seeing it at part of the law, a little bit explanation coming to it. Now, as you know, we saw it again in Leviticus. It mentioned it there in chapter 23. But over in chapter 26, there was also a mention. And if somebody would like to read Leviticus chapter 26, verses 34 and 35, if you'd read that for me, that would be great.
I got it.
Okay.
Then the land will enjoy its Sabbath all the days of the desolation, while you're in your enemy's land. Then the land will rest and enjoy its Sabbaths. All the days of its desolation it will observe the rest which it did not observe on your Sabbaths while you were living on it.
All right, God had actually warned them. If they wouldn't, like, take this Sabbath, and particularly here, it's not really talking so much about the seventh day Sabbath as there would be a seventh year Sabbath, okay, where they were not to plant crops. And we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. But God warned them, look, if you don't do this, whenever you end up in a land that you're hauled off to, then your land's going to see rest. And for every year that you miss that, your land's going to get to rest. So they had the warning out there. But let's talk about the Sabbath. I've tried to see what I could find out about this. Now, I thought at first, and believe me, guys, whenever it comes to studying this stuff, most of the things that I've studied, I had tremendous help with. Yeah, Darren's not smart enough to figure out all this stuff on his own, so don't think that. You know, I've like studied a million different sources trying to figure out how to put this together. But what I was particularly interested in is something that I've been told. You've been in one of those lessons and they talk about what they weren't allowed to do on the Sabbath. They were allowed to walk so many steps and those kind of things. Well, I've been one of those people who talk about those kind of things too. You know, in a sermon whenever I've got it, you know, the Jews could only go this far. Truth is, I really didn't know. I just heard, you know, about those things. So I did some looking up to find out in more or less modern day stance, you know, where are we at today? Now, I'm talking about looking at the people who say they are Jews, okay? Now, I will like to say something about that I'll mention later. There is no genealogical records today. Those things have completely been destroyed. So those claims are hard to prove. Whenever it comes to a priesthood, impossible. And I'll show you scripture that shows that if you don't have a priesthood, you don't have anything. You can't put a high priest in without a priesthood. We'll get to that much later in the study about that. But, you know, being that set aside, there are people who take a Sabbath. Now, whenever they did, I looked up some things, and they said the Jews, the Jewish leaders they called it bad about, but they were real bad about building fences around walls. I'm sorry, around walls, not walls. That just reverse those L's there. The L goes here and drop one and L-O. It's kind of a joke, really, it is. Never mind. Let's just move on. They like to build fences around walls. In other words, if this was the law, they're going to build a fence all around it out there so you won't break the law in here. Now, first of all, I'm going to show you something here in a minute that's really neat. But let me just say that, does anybody know what God's name is? His personal name? Okay, Yahweh. Okay, now there's been some talk, before that you heard the word Jehovah. Okay, you ever heard the word Jehovah? And they found out that J wasn't really spoken in Hebrew, and then Yahweh. You ever notice in the Old Testament you see the word Lord? Okay, you ever notice in a lot of the English versions it's all capital letters? Okay, there's a reason for that. Whenever it's all capital letters, it's actually the word Yahweh, personal name of God. Now, you got to wonder, well, how did we get there? You know, why is it not in our English Bibles? Well, it has to do with the Jews building fences around things. what do you think commandment it might have come from that they were concerned about? Taking the Lord's name in vain. Used to be whenever I heard somebody say, God, that's not really right. I'm not going to say, I won't even say it now in here. Anyway, you understand what I'm saying. Some of y'all don't. Okay, you do. Nod your head one way or another. Okay, anyway, you hear some kid in the playground yells God with a loud, offensive way. You understand now what I'm saying? Okay, there he did that. You took the Lord's name in vain. Well, the truth is, God is a generic word that doesn't, it's like El or Elohim. It can mean Baal. It's a word for God, of that kind. But we know the word Baal, don't we? Or Baal, if you want to say it like that. But it's the name of a god, right? The name Moloch, Chemosh. Yeah, those are all names. Strangely enough, the one we've hidden is the name of our God that we serve, and it's Yahweh. And I got to thinking, and whenever you read about it, it's amazing because I think it was Tyndale who was the first one who hid it in the English version and wouldn't write it in there. And then everybody carried it forward like that. And it's pretty fascinating whenever you think about it, as we ought to know the name of the God we serve. You understand what I'm saying? And it's right there in our Bibles, but it's hidden behind the word Lord. It's where it's hidden. So, that's just one of the examples that comes from the Jewish people building fences around something. Now, whenever you get a chance, go look at your Old Testament Bible and you'll see the word Lord, L-O-R-D, in capital letters. And whenever you see it, you remember that statement in the New Testament that Jesus questions the Pharisees over? Why is it that David said, my Lord, I've just lost it. My Lord said to the Lord, set at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool. Remember that statement? How does that sound to us? Weird, goofy. You know why? Because half of it's hidden. It's like Yahweh said to my Lord, and there's another word for Lord there. Actual word for Lord is used in there along with your Yahweh. But how does it come out to us? Confusing, because it's all hidden back behind there. So that's one thing that they did, and it trickled down to us because they didn't want in any way, shape, or form to mispronounce or take the name of God as they would consider it in vain, and therefore basically they just hid it and buried it. And here we are today. You ask people, what's the name of the God you serve? And well, we can tell them about Baal, we can tell them about Moloch, but I'm not for sure. I'll have to look that up and see what is the personal name of the God I serve. And it's kind of weird that we got there, but that's to do with this. Well, so like I said, they built fences. Well, to keep away from the Sabbath, they built a lot of fences. So have we got that little video up there? Oh, okay. Now this guy speaks a little bit of broken English. He lives over in Israel, but you'll get what's going on here. Oh no.
We didn't do anything with that.
Well, it might be my fault.
Probably not. I just probably have this all the way down.
Oh, go back a slide. Okay, all right. Now we're better. Oh, he's going to turn it up. He's cranking it up, guys. It's going to be loud.
Thing 94 will do it.
A little hard to understand this fella, okay?
Judaism is a religion that is based on obeying rules. The Ten Commandments are very well known, but actually there are 613 rules in the Bible, and rabbis have added 1,000 more throughout the generations. One of the rules is that it is forbidden to use electricity devices on a Shabbat. But what about people who live on the third floor and can't walk down the stairs? This is why the Shabbat elevator was invented. On Friday evening, before the Shabbat begins, you turn it on, continues to run automatically during the entire Shabbat without requiring anyone to press buttons and break the Shabbat. It goes up a floor, opens its doors, waits for a moment, closes them, and continues on to the next floor until it reaches the top floor. Follow me for more stuff about Israel. Yalla bye.
I don't know if you guys understood him right. Not. I heard about this, and I wanted to make sure it was true, so I went to YouTube quick, and I knew somebody was going to have a video about this thing. Turns out there were several. Everybody get what they were doing? They're saying, you don't push a button in the elevator. The elevator stops automatically on the Sabbath. That's Shabbat. That's what he was talking about there. So that they don't dare break the Sabbath in any way, the elevator automatically stops at every floor. Now, personally, I get frustrated whenever elevators do that. So,
I convert to Christianity.
over that deal right there alone.
We ought to be standing at those elevators with the Bible.
So that was, okay, so we're going to try to look at some of these as they stand even now. But these have come from, like, basically, okay, you've got the Torah, which is the Old Testament. It can mean first 5 books, or it can mean the Old Testament, okay, the Torah. But you've also got like what's called the Talmud. Okay, the Talmud is more of rabbinical writings, commentary on the Torah is what we would call it. And there's like 2 different ones. One's the Babylonian Talmud, and the other, I can't think what the name of the Talmud is. So within that, you would find all these different ideas and laws placed, or rules. Did you hear him say there's 613? Okay, that's what, if you break down in the Old Testament, first 5 books, the laws, you'll come up with 613. Now, you have to almost see the list to understand them, because I didn't really understand them on how they broke them down. But that's what that is in here, 613. Okay, but do you hear him say, but they put many, many more on us? Okay? All right, so let's see some. Oh, you already got them up here. All right. Adding fresh water to a vase to cut flowers. Sowing. Any activity that causes further plant growth. Making a bouquet of flowers.
So to be clear, these are things that they would not be allowed to do because it might seem like they were doing the second thing, which is prohibited.
Right. They're not allowed to do this because they're not allowed to accidentally break the Sabbath, okay? Like they prohibit this so you don't accidentally get involved. So let's see. Brushing dried mud from boots or clothing, grinding. Cutting hair or nails. Shearing sheep, removing outer coverings of a human or animal, applying makeup. Dyeing is what that's considered. Braiding hair, weaving, drawing blood for a blood test, slaughtering. Rubbing soap to make lather, applying face cream, polishing shoes, using scouring powder for utensils and other surfaces, scraping smooth the surface of any material, grinding, rubbing. It kind of tells in what those would cause. Sharpening a pencil, guys. Wow. Cutting the sharp is alternating the size and shape of the item for human use. Painting, drawing, and typing. Tearing through a letter on a package. Opening an umbrella or unfolding a screen. Smoking a cigarette. Using a telephone. Switching off an electric light. Setting a winding clock or watch. Wearing eyeglasses not permanently required. What do you guys think? Well, Gina and I kind of looked over some of this, and we were like, I think you better stay in bed. That's what I come up with. All right, but these are some things you can't even touch. Money and checks, scissors, hammers, saws, pencils, pens, battery-operated toys, flashlights, radios, CDs, telephones, and computers. Can't even touch them. Okay, what else we got? Is that all you've got? Didn't I have some, let me look in here, things you can't even touch. And then what can we do? Okay. Wasn't there some things you couldn't think about? Did I? Oh, I'm serious, guys. There was.
Things you couldn't even think about.
Yeah, there were some things you can't even touch.
And you're going to make us sit here and think about it.
I know.
It's not Friday night. We're okay.
Okay, one is forbidden to even think about or make plans for the week ahead, such as preparing equipment, mapping out a route, readying a briefcase for the next day, or setting a table for a party on Saturday night. You got to think, okay, so Sabbath is on Saturday, okay? So that means it starts on Friday evening. And we'll try to get all this cleared up later, but it starts on Friday evening, so by Saturday night, it's actually no longer the Sabbath. You're on the first day of the week. We'll try to get all that stuff cleared up. So that's things you can't even think about, guys. How do you not think about them? I think about them by trying not to think about them. I mean, it gets really complicated. All right, let's see here. What can we do? Then what can we do? For activity to be considered as work forbidden on the Sabbath, the violation must be intentional. Therefore, moving a chair from one place to another is permissible, even though it may produce an imprint on the ground. Similarly, walking on the grass is allowed, even though it may result in some of it being crushed underfoot, thus technically constitute the prohibited activity mentioned above in the forbidding to cut blades of grass. But it is okay to walk on the grass. I don't know for how long. Well, it all may seem complicated, at least it did to me. But any thoughts on that? Anything else? Anybody else in here know any more than that? No, I really, in sermons, I'd always use the kindling of fire, because I'd heard things about driving a car and the engine combusting and those kind of things, and I didn't really think it was true. And I'm pretty much convinced it's probably true. You know, that's how they see it. But my goodness gracious, it's a difficult life to live. Well, let's take a look at what really went on scripturally, because I want us to get a good picture of this. And Jake, I don't have a good eye on a clock anywhere, so I don't know what I'm looking at or what I'm doing. Do I just see people doing this? Is this a message? Like,
I can give you a heads up at some point if you want 5 minutes or
okay.
2 minutes. Or
Well, I just want to let the people go to eat, is what I'm saying. So,
well, it's 7:11 right now. We usually break at 7:30.
okay, all right. Just so I'm not, I mean, I don't want to run them past, so that's what I'm trying to do. So just, yeah.
Stand at 3 minutes.
Yeah, stand at 3 minutes or something like that. Okay, whatever. Okay, yeah. All right. All right. Let's all take our Bibles. Let's go to Exodus chapter 16. And let's try to get a look here at a case that has to do with the Sabbath. And it'll be something we all can kind of wrap our heads around, that biblically speaking actually, happened. And this is God with the Sabbath, not the rabbis trying to figure out how to keep us away from it. So, okay, so we're going to Exodus 16. And I kind of got this broke up, but if somebody read verses 1 through 3, and the next person 12 through 15. It's how we're going to break it up. So will anybody read Exodus 16, 1 through 3?
They took their journey from Shittim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came into the wilderness of Sin, which is between Shittim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month, after their departing out of the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said unto them, would to God we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, but we sat by the flat pot and when we had eaten bread to the full, for we have brought us forth into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly unholy.
All right, so you guys probably know this story very well, better than I do, but we're in the time whenever they are on their way to Sinai. That's where they're going. God's kind of leading them there, and one of the first, one of the complaints we see is we don't have anything to eat. And you guys see how they're bringing it about, like, why? You've heard this story before. Don't think we're any better. Don't get the idea they're the bad guys and we're the same way. We're probably worse. Well, let's go to verse 12 so you know the picture. Let's go to verse 12 through 15, and somebody read that for us.
I have heard the complaints of the children of Israel. Speak to them, saying, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God. So it was that quails came up at evening and covered the camp, and in the morning the dew lay all around the camp. And when the layer of dew lifted, there on the surface of the wilderness was a small round substance, as fine as frost on the ground. So when the children of Israel saw it, they said to one another, what is it? For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, this is the bread which the Lord has given you to eat.
All right, so they're like, what is this white flaky stuff landing on the ground? And we know it better as what? Manna. Okay, so you guys are well familiar with this. Now I need somebody who's really brave. I'd like to, if we could read verses 16 through 31, guys. I know it's a lot, but we'll get the full picture of what's going to happen here.
I'm brave. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather of it every man as much as he should eat. You shall take an omer apiece according to the number of persons each of you has in his tent. The sons of Israel did so, and some gathered much and some little. When they measured it with an omer, he who had gathered much had no excess, and he who gathered little had no lack. Every man gathered as much as he should eat. Moses said to them, let no man leave any of it until morning. But they did not listen to Moses, and some left part of it until morning, and it bred worms and became foul, and Moses was angry with them. They gathered it morning by morning, every man as much as he should eat, but when the sun grew hot, it would melt. Now on the 6th day they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one. When all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, then he said to them, this is what the Lord meant. Tomorrow is a Sabbath observance, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake, and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over put aside to be kept until morning. So they put it aside until morning, as Moses had ordered, and it did not become foul, nor was there any worm in it. Moses said, eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will be none. It came about on the 7th day that some of the people went out to gather, but they found none. Then the Lord said to Moses, how long do you refuse to keep my commandments and my instructions? See, the Lord has given you the Sabbath, therefore he gives you bread for 2 days on the 6th day. Remain every man in his place. Let no man go out of his place on the 7th day. So the people rested on the 7th day. The house of Israel named it manna, and it was like coriander seed, white, and its taste was like wafers with honey.
Thank you very much. What is it? Manna. What is it? Manna. Manna. Manna, what? Manna means what is it? Okay. This is not who's on third or something. Okay. All right.
Man, what is it?
Yeah. What is it? It's manna. Okay. That's what we're saying. Okay. So anyway, did you see verse 31? I don't know. I mark odd things in my Bible, but basically, it tells you kind of what it tastes like and what it looked like. So you kind of get an idea there of it right there. Did you notice what Jake was reading right there? So what's really happening here? 6 days that manna is on the ground, right? All right. Now some of them would try to keep it. They gather a little more than they needed. What happened to it? It spoiled, didn't it? Okay. Now they were told it's on the what day could they gather double? On the 6th day. Okay. So this is pretty amazing to them that if I gather double on the 1st day, it spoils, but on the 6th day if I gather double, it'll keep. So first of all, God was a little angry with them because it seemed like there was times whenever they just, I'm going to get more, and they get more, and then it don't keep, and he's frustrated with them. But we kind of go around that circle. But here you see that is one of the first times that we see that, hey, we're going to have to trust God. God's saying, trust me on this. 6 days you're going to have it, and on the 6th day you'll have double. You won't have to gather any of the 7th day. Just trust me, it's going to be there. Okay? Now, that's a Sabbath day. Okay? Just one example we see in Scripture whenever God was getting them to take a Sabbath day. Now, let's go over to Leviticus 25. And we're going to go in verses 1 through 7 here. And here we're going to see something about a Sabbath year. Okay? So Exodus 25, who'll read verses 1 through 7 for us?
The Lord then spoke to Moses at Mount Sinai, saying, speak to the sons of Israel, and say to them, when you come into the land which I shall give you, then the land shall have a Sabbath to the Lord. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard, and gather its crop. But during the 7th year the land shall have Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall not sow your field, nor prune your vineyard. Your harvest aftergrowth you shall not reap, and your grapes untrimmed vines you shall not gather. And the land shall have a sabbatical year. All of you have a Sabbath products of the land for food, yourselves and your male and female slaves, and your hired men and your foreign residents. those who live as aliens with you. Even your cattle and the animals that are in your land shall have all crops to eat.
All right. Now, this is a Sabbath year rest. So what are they not going to do in a Sabbath year?
Plant.
They're not going to plant. Okay. They're not going to plant. And what does, we had some of those little tomato plants that produce those little cherry tomatoes. Gina didn't know it, but I stuck them in her landscaping. Like I got them out. Ace Hardware store was up the road from us at the time. And I noticed at night that the plant company would come along and they would throw all the plants they didn't think were any good in the dumpster. So I went up the dumpster and I got out the tomato plants and I brought them back and planted them in our landscaping. Hey, those little cherry tomatoes were tasty, let me tell you. Guess what they did next year? I didn't plant them. They volunteered themselves back. So here's the thing. The land is going to volunteer back some things. But what are they supposed to do with that? They supposed to harvest it? No. Don't harvest that right there. And, so then we see, you got to be thinking, if you're hearing this law, you're like thinking to yourself, I'm not a farmer, guys. Some of you all are. Now, you actually do give the land, would you say you give the land a rest or you plant something different there every so many years? What is it?
Well, the way I do it,
It's called rotation.
Rotation. Okay. And they'll rotate the crops. But most of us would be kind of like, if we're dependent on a crop, we're kind of hoping that's there every year. So whenever you're hearing this, you got to be thinking in the back of your mind, I don't know about this. This is asking a lot here. Well, let's go down to verse 20, and let's look at 20 and 21 and 22 in the same chapter. It says, but if you say, what are we going to eat on the seventh year if we don't sow and gather crops? Then I will so order my blessings for you in the 6th year that you will bring forth a crop for how many years? 3 years. When you are sowing the 8th year, you can still eat the old things from the crop, eating the old things till the what? 9th year when crop comes in. So they're, excuse me, I have a question. What are we supposed to do if we don't sow? You don't have to think this out very long before you're thinking, I don't know how this is working. So somebody's raising their hand. How's this supposed to work? And God tells them what? He's like, look, on that 6th year, you're going to have a crop that's big enough to make it all the way through. We're not just going to cover the 7th year. We're going to go on to the 8th year here. You're going to have that big a crop. So here, God is really asking them, he's saying, trust me. That's what he's saying here. And guys, I think, if we're honest, this is a little hard to do right here. What we know, if you don't plant, you don't sow. That's pretty well true right there. So it's like, I don't know about this. Well, there's one more. This one here, we're going to back up in the chapter a little bit. Oh my goodness, it's another big reading. It's verses 8 through 19. Will somebody read that for us? It's 25. It's 8 through 19. I did do that right? Yeah.
You are also to count off 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years, so that you have the time of the 7 Sabbaths of years, namely 49 years. You shall then sound a ram's horn abroad on the 10th day of the 7th month of the Day of Atonement. You shall sound a horn all through your land. You shall thus consecrate the 50th year and proclaim a release through the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his own property, and each of you shall return to his family. You shall have the 50th year as a jubilee. You shall not sow, nor reap its aftergrowth, nor gather in from its untrimmed vines. For it is a jubilee, it shall be holy to you. You shall eat its crop out of the field. On this year of jubilee, each of you shall return to his own property. If you make a sale, moreover, to your friend or buy from your friend's hand, you shall not wrong one another. Corresponding to the number of years after the jubilee, you shall buy from your friend
he is to sell to you according to the number of years of crops. In proportion to the extent of the years you shall increase its price, and in proportion to the fewness of the years you shall diminish its price, for it is a number of crops he is selling to you. So you shall not wrong one another, but you shall fear your God, for I am the Lord your God. You shall thus observe my statutes and keep my judgments, so as to carry them out, that you may live securely on the land.
Thank you very much. I brought with me a horn. Yeah, I don't know how to use it. And you can get these on Amazon, I found out. So anyway, it's a ram's horn. It was $54. That's as much as I can afford. You can get them bigger if you want to pay more money for them, but this was an 18 to 20 inch. So they sounded the ram's horn, and this actually is going to show up several times. You're welcome to come up here and look at it later and fingerprint it, and maybe some of you guys who play musical instruments will actually know how to get noise out of it. But anyway, they're going to sound that ram's horn. Did you guys catch that on this, what's it called? Jubilee. When's it happen? Every 50th year. And whenever they do, guys, I don't know if you guys caught that around verse 13, but what's property starting to do? It's going back. I mean, there is a change. Do you remember that story, Naboth and Ahab, the vineyard? Do you remember that story? If you read it, like it had something to do with that property going back to family rights, and Ahab's trying to buy it. No, I'm not going to sell it to you. Remember that? And then they ended up Jezebel. Jezebel had Naboth murdered and all that. Remember that? Yeah, that was an ugly scene. I always heard that had something to do with what was talked about here. Now, I'm not sure if you read this right here and it's like, wow, this is different right here. This is, this could be a great thing, but it could also be a very scary thing. And I'm telling you that I'm not sure there's ever an account of them celebrating this. Okay? In fact, I know they end up going into captivity over, that God, whenever they go on to captivity, he let the land rest for 70 years. You remember that? Okay? All right. Okay, so we already talked about the land will enjoy the Sabbaths. All right. Jake hadn't stood up. We got time to go into the New Testament. Whenever we go... Oh, you get ready to stand up.
3 minutes till.
It's on the border of standing up. Then let's get this in quick. Mark chapter 2, verse 23 through 27. Now we're in the New Testament, so the Sabbath is well established by the time of Christ, and they are going to give Jesus problems over the Sabbath. In fact, he is healing on the Sabbath, and they're saying what? You're breaking the Sabbath, okay? And whenever we see some of these laws, it's not hard to figure how they're coming up with some of this stuff. So, Mark chapter 2, verses 23 through 28. Somebody read that for us in a hurry, like you were leaving the land of Egypt or for the Passover. Okay.
It happened that he was passing through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and his disciples began to make their way along while picking the heads of grain. And the Pharisees were saying to him, "Look, why are you doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "Have you never read that what David did when he was in need and his companions became hungry? How he entered the house of God in the time of Abiathar, the high priest, and ate the consecrated bread, which is not lawful for anyone to eat except the priest, and he also gave it to those who were with him. And Jesus said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not the man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even on the Sabbath."
All right, let me make a couple of points out of this. Boy, you're going to turn my mic on and everything, huh? Get me off here. Wow, it gets pushy. Anyway, okay, let me make a couple quick points. First of all, this is one of the times whenever Jesus actually answers them over the Sabbath, and this goes on and on all through the Gospels. But whenever he does, first of all, one thing he says is the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. That could have settled it all. But what he said that they never really understood was in verse 27. Jesus said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. God had given them the Sabbath so they could rest. You work 6 days. You work hard 6 days. God's saying, you're going to get a day of rest. You work 6 years. You've worked and toiled all this time. You're going to get a rest the 7th year, and I'm going to take care of it. So what God's telling them is trust me. I'm going to give you rest. So here they are, guys. They had taken something that God made for them, and they had turned it into a burden. You want to know how big of a burden it was? Go back and read that screen we saw. Honestly, if I lived in Israel today and I was Jewish, and thank goodness I'm a Christian and the gospel's been presented to me, but I'm telling you, if I was, I don't think I'd get out of bed because I'd be afraid to. Because that's how big of a burden it would be to me. And I wouldn't be happy about doing nothing all the time. All right, we're going to stop right there because you're past standing up, aren't you? Yeah, I messed up.
Right there. No, we're right
All
there.
right. All right. Now listen, guys. I've never done anything like this before with this. So is this okay? We're not moving at a pace that's boring or anything like that, right? I mean, we're doing okay? Okay. So as long as we're doing okay. So basically, we've looked at the Sabbath from, how that they built fences around it. And we looked at, we kind of concluded with one statement Jesus made. That's saying the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath, which pretty much exposed the whole thing and the mistake they made. So now I want to get into something that I think is a bit more difficult. In fact, I'm going to just tell you, even in my own right, there is part of this that I'm not comfortable and satisfied with, okay? So knowing that, and even though my conclusions here are good biblical conclusions, it doesn't always mean I'm not much different than them. Just how as they were gnawing on things and trying to say, I don't understand this, a lot of times this is where I'm at with it. So, okay? So what about today? Okay, and I'm not talking about Israel. We already looked at Israel and what all they do today and saw their elevators and other stuff. So I'm talking about the church. Okay? Now, I'll be the first one that'll start. When I was little, growing up, we did not have businesses that were open on Sunday. Okay? Now, there was this thing called the Blue Law. And I think it was a state of Kentucky thing. I don't think it was it broader than that? Does anybody know? I don't know. Okay. You lived in Indiana all your life? You ever heard of Blue Law?
I have.
You have? Did you all have a Blue Law?
I don't recall. I remember when there wasn't very many people or very many businesses open on Sundays.
Okay.
I was going to say, I never heard of the Blue Law, but I can remember back when I was maybe 8, 9, 10 years older, about everything was closed other than restaurants.
Okay. So you guys kind of know that's the world that I grew up in right there. Now, it's not hard to see we're not in that world today. Now, I do want you to realize that the Sunday is in no way is it the same day. It is the first day of the week, okay? So the Sabbath was the last day of the week. I'm just saying that because the world that I grew up in didn't really see it that way. Okay, I grew up in a world that Sunday was part of the Ten Commandments. And it is part of the Ten Commandments, okay? Now, this is where you guys can kind of get edgy, and I mean, there's going to be different feelings about this, and I understand that. Where I was, Ten Commandments were on the wall, and one of them said, remember the Sabbath to keep it holy, and that's what we did on Sunday. Okay? All right. I'm not taking anything away from that. I'm just telling you that's what we did. In the 80s, around 1982, 83, there was a disturbance that occurred in the little church I went to. Disturbance was with our preacher. He come out of Florida. He was caught on a Sunday mowing his yard. It was a church parsonage. Okay? They went to him. And they're like, what are you doing? Mowing the yard on Sunday. the Lord's Day. And he answered back to them, I can do that. It's okay. That caused this, excuse me, this wave to go through the congregation. It wasn't like he ever got up in front and said anything about it. It was a conversation between him and somebody talking about, why are you mowing your yard? And then it waved. There was a wave that went through the whole congregation in little pockets saying, the preacher says it's okay to mow your yard on Sunday. Was there a sense of freedom that was accepted? No. There was a sense of, I don't know, we need to get rid of this guy. Okay? So that's the world that I grew up in about the Sabbath. Now, later, somebody would finally bring it up to me that the Sabbath was not Sunday. They would do it like that. They'd say, hey, the Sabbath is the 6th, but we're here on the first day of the week, which was pretty obvious when I read in Scripture. It just never occurred to me. You know, I'd always, guys, I mixed the Sabbath up with it. Now, does this extend to today in a lot of the way that I saw? Is it still exists? The other day, that at church, Gina does taxes, okay? Tax season just ended on April 15th, but I'm not convinced it's ended yet, being she still gets calls even today. No, I mean literally today she's gotten calls. She got her phone forwarded from the office. She does a little over 700 tax returns in a year's time in this short, compacted season right there. So there's tons of returns. So sometimes on a Sunday afternoon, she will go to her office and work on taxes between services. Now, I realize that some of you guys may not come back tomorrow night and hear me because I said that, okay? Well, please hear me out. The other day, someone in the church who she did their taxes wanted to know, actually, you told them to bring their stuff to you.
Yes, he had some information that he still needed to give to me, and I said, just bring it to me at church Sunday night.
In case you didn't hear that, he had information that she still needed to give him, and she said, just bring it to me to church at night. And he said, okay, if that's all right with the man upstairs. Okay. Now, he had a philosophy that I had heard my uncle say years ago and still existed. It was like this. If you do it on Sunday, you do it again on Monday. Okay? Now, I can't find that in Scripture, but that was the general thought that existed between a lot of the people in the area. So, you know, I'm going to guess that in some levels, we still kind of like have drugged the Sabbath over a little bit in different ways. Do you guys think this is true? All right. Now, some of you guys are thinking immediately, well, what about this and what about this? And, you know, and okay. So let me just look at this. Here's the different thoughts. You can split up about the ideas about the Sabbath today in about 3 different ways. One is this. The Sabbath still stands, and it's still on Saturday. Okay? Now, the place that would mostly hold to this, although it's extended a little from this, would be the Seventh-day Adventists. Okay? Mostly, they would be the ones who would strongly teach this, but there are other groups that would teach these kind of things, not just... Herbert W. Armstrong, does anybody remember that name? He was associated with what was called the Worldwide Church of God. They were kind of in these circles too, pockets, and so they were pretty much scattered abroad. But basically, they would take Scripture and say Sunday is not the Sabbath of all. The Almighty Sabbath, according to His unalterable 10 Commandments, is the 7th day of the week. Okay? Obviously, Saturday. And that's kind of where they stand. Now, whenever you dig into this, and I've dug in, I've had a few people who I've known, a few from the church actually, who ended up following some of this doctrine. And whenever I ask them, okay, what do you do on the Sabbath? That answer gets really tricky. Well, we may watch TV, we may, there'll be certain things they will do. They'll have their services on that day, so they will go to a service. Now, you got to think about this, and, like, what did they do on the Sabbath day originally? Did they go to service? No. The only time they went to service was God called them together at the temple. Now, later they had what was called the synagogue. And, they had some services that went on then. A lot of teaching went on of the synagogue, maybe even daily. But that wasn't, no. Originally here, we're just going to meet about, whenever these appointed feasts are, and get your families together. Other than that, no, you're going to do this. You're going to observe the Sabbath, but no, we're not coming. So, they would do that. So it gets really sketchy. Sometimes you have to wonder. And secondly, you'll find that there's other laws that they will attempt to keep. And you'll see this in some different groups and stuff. And whenever you look at the scriptures, sometimes you can kind of scare yourself and say, I don't know, maybe we need to be keep, at a big view, and all of a sudden you're like thinking about it like that. Okay, but that's one view, is the Sabbath still stands, and we still do it on Saturday. Okay, here's another one. The Sabbath still stands, but it was changed to Sunday. Now, guys, I think this is the one that people where I live was mostly caught up in, is this one right here. I really do. And I think to some degree they still are. First of all, we would have to look at the Bible and find that change. And that's a problem, okay? Because you don't find that change in the Bible. That doesn't happen, okay? Adam Clark. You ever heard of the Adam Clark commentary? It's easy to get a hold of. Let me read a commentary on 1 Corinthians 16, okay? Says, it appears from the whole that the first day of the week, which is the Christian Sabbath, was the day on which their principal religious meetings were held in Corinth and the churches of Galatia, and consequently in other places where Christianity had prevailed. This is a strong argument for keeping of the Christian Sabbath. Okay, so we start seeing that, but I don't know if you actually know this or not, but where the idea of this Christian Sabbath came from is mostly from the Puritans. And I didn't realize that. And if you want to read about the Puritans, best thing to read about is probably the Salem witch trials. You'll find out the Puritans were heavily involved in the Salem witch trials. And if you want to learn about them, it's an interesting story, and you'll learn about the Puritans in the background. Okay. So what scripture do you use to support something about the seventh day Sabbath? Well, let's look here at, let's go to Acts chapter 20 and verse 7 right here. Okay. And I think most of you guys are going to know this scripture. And it says, on the first day of the week, when we were gathered together to, what, break bread, Paul began talking to them, intending to depart the next day, and he prolonged his message until midnight. All right. Now, if you read the majority commentaries, they're going to tell you that the church was meeting on the first day of the week. So where do we gather that from? Well, they were meeting here. Okay, shows the first day of the week. And went over that 1 Corinthians passage, we would see that Paul told him to set aside an offering on the first day of the week. So there's these little hints here and there in Scripture that the church was coming together on the first day of the week. Now, particularly here, and I don't think there's too much argument about this. It says on the first day of the week, when we were gathered together to break bread. Now, let me just tell you this. That particular break bread doesn't have a definite article in there that may or may not mean anything to you. But basically, if we went back to Acts in chapter 2 and we looked at verse 42, we would look at, and they continued steadfastly in the what? In the apostles' doctrine and in the fellowship and in the breaking of the bread. And it's kind of taken away in English, but that actually says in the breaking of the bread. So it points it out really clear that it's not just talking about some regular meal. It's talking about Lord's Supper is what it's talking about. Now, in verse 47, if we went down there, we would see about they were meeting daily in the houses. and breaking bread from house to house. Okay? Now, I've had more than one person tell me, see, Darren, they took the Lord's Supper every day. Now, I'm going to say that's not true. Okay? And I'm going to tell you why that I believe it's not true. Because there's no definite article. It's just breaking bread. You know, they were breaking bread from house to house, eating their meals with gladness and sincerity of heart. Those were families getting together, eating meals in that verse there. The Christians were doing that. The early church was doing that as, you know, they were getting together. You know, we could, you know, what if I wrote down, we come together Sunday and we broke bread? Now, you would probably say, oh, yeah, the church comes together, they take the Lord's Supper. Well, what if I told you, well, we come together and we were studying and we took a break and we broke bread and we ate a meal and then we went back to study. Okay, because basically that's how the construction is between those two. Now, would you think that we were eating the Lord's Supper the second time? No, you were here, you know we aren't eating the Lord's Supper second time, right? I mean, it was easy to see. So I do believe there's a difference in there. Well, because there's no definite article in that second one, many will go to this right here and try to make an argument, well, he's talking about a meal there. But, you know, guys, there is no reason that Paul would have waited this long to go here other than it was the Lord's Supper. So I think we do see that they're meeting on the first day of the week and the church is coming together to partake of the Lord's Supper. Now, you and I both know that the Corinthian letter showed that there were some issues with the Lord's Supper, wasn't there? Okay? We could go back and look at 1 Corinthians 10 and 1 Corinthians 11, and we can see Paul is addressing problems. So we know that they're partaking of the Lord's Supper, and we know that there's more than one hint that they come together at a particular time to do it. So we could come up with all kinds of reasons why they decided to meet together on the first day of the week. I personally believe this. I believe the apostles set that apart. The apostles were taught things pertaining to the kingdom for 40 days from Jesus. And I believe during that time, some of those things that we can't particularly look at Jesus and get our answer for, but it seems to, you know, come from the apostles. And whose doctrine are they studying? The apostles' doctrine. When did Jesus raise? First day of the week. Okay, so I believe there's some really good reasons that they were partaking of the Lord's Supper on the first day of the week right there. But what I don't believe is the Bible ever teaches that the day was switched, that the Sabbath was ever switched to Sunday. I don't think there's any teaching you and I is ever going to come up with to believe that. In fact, there's all indication from 1 Corinthians chapter 11, where Paul's in that talk about the Lord's Supper, and he said, some of you guys, and evidently they had the Lord's Supper tied in with this, you know, with a what do they call it? It's a what? A love feast. You'll find this thing about a love feast. And Paul actually tries to break that apart. You know, he's like, eat at home, okay? You know, so he breaks apart the Lord's Supper from that. But evidently they were doing something like that. But he makes that statement about, you know, some of you guys are full and others aren't. You remember those statements he's making there? You know, there's good reason to believe that there was a crowd of wealthy and there was a crowd of very poor who had to work. And they couldn't get there at the same time as the others. So basically, it's all gone whenever these poor folk get there. You know, I don't know exactly how it goes down. We just read between the lines until we tell what we can tell. But what I'm saying is, evidently, you know, it's the first day of the week at the time. There's work going to go on. Okay? I mean, this was their first work day of the week. The Jews celebrated the Sabbath this other day, on Saturday. But, you know, we're talking about, you know, this is where the thing starts. So, you know, how do we get here today? I mean, we would just have to go down and trace it through history. Like I say, the Puritans played a big part in getting things kind of rearranged around where we think about the Sabbath. But whenever you think about it, you know, if I ask you the question, are we bound to keep the Sabbath today? I think you guys would mostly say no. But then all of us would be just a little finicky about stuff on this. Isn't it odd? Someone mentioned a while ago that even under the blue laws, restaurants were open. What about those guys who have to work it there? I mean, you know, we can say, you know, we can I mean, sometimes we'll fuss and say, look at all these businesses that are open on Sunday when none of those people should be in church. And yeah, I want the sausage and egg cheese biscuit with a large, excuse me, get my order right this time too, as I'm on my way to church. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we are so two-faced on this issue. If you're going to try to hold strong to it, boy, it's going to get hard, isn't it, guys, to really, stick on this. We're going to have to make a day of preparation, aren't we, where we get ready and have everything ready. We're going to end up making a burden of the Sabbath that we stuck on the wrong day before it's over with. All right. So, oh my goodness, here we go. Let's think about this in, what have I got here? Why have I got Exodus 40? Let's read it and find out. Okay. All right. Exodus chapter, did I say 40? I meant 34. Exodus 34, 27 and 28. Will somebody read that for us?
Then the Lord said to Moses, write down these words, for in accordance with these words I have made a covenant with you and with Israel. So he was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. He did not eat bread or drink water, and he wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 Commandments.
All right. The words of the covenant, which is the 10 Commandments. Now, there were some efforts down through the years to separate out the law into 3 categories. One is the law that was put on stone, the 10 Commandments. And then there was another section that was the social side, what is the word I'm looking for? Ceremonial. The ceremonial law. And then there was one more. And that one's totally left me. So I'm not going to find it. Anyway, what? Civil and moral and ceremonial. I'm so glad you got my notes over here and can do better with them than I can up here. Okay, so there was a split that many have tried to do. In fact, if you want to argue around with somebody from a church that's keeping the Sabbath, they'll go directly to this split and say, well, that's this, but that's not ceremonial, and that's not, civil, that's over here. There is no split like that, guys, in the Old Testament, as bad as we want to think. And we'll be talking more about the Book of the Covenant and the 10 Commandments and the Book of the Law, the first 5 books of the Bible. We'll try to break all that up later in another study. But notice in here, who was the covenant given to? This Old Covenant. It was given to Israel. Did you see that in there? It said it was given to Israel. So the Old Covenant was given to Israel. And guys, if a lot of times we pick and choose, even today, what we want to do. But think about this. Leviticus chapter 11, verses 9 and 10. Let me read it for you really quick. These you may eat, whatever is in the water, all that have fins and scales, those in the water, in the seas, in the rivers, you may eat. But whatever is in the seas and in the rivers that do not have fins and scales, among all the teeming life of the water, and among all the living creatures that are in the water, they are detestable things to you. That just cut Darren out of all the crab legs at the seafood restaurants, and that's why I go to the seafood restaurants, guys, is to eat the crab legs, because I love those things. Me and my wife, she loves them if you'll crack them for her, but not so much if she has to do all the work. And secondly, if you're not good at it, you'll end up with nothing. You'll starve eating crab legs. But I'm telling you, shellfish got cut out. So we can't pick and choose, because look what James says in James 2:10. For whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles in one point, he has become guilty of all. Something to think about. All right, so, we really come into a problem. So ultimately we come into this. The Old Testament was given to Israel, and we're underneath what today? The New Testament, the New Covenant, that's us. The New Covenant is just that, it's new. Okay, we're not dragging around things here from the Old Covenant and trying to make them work. And secondly, we're real bad about just picking what we want. All right, and just using that and then dropping something else. It's that's not the system. Let me try to, I'm looking again at a clock, see. Oh, here's a clock. It's 8:12. Okay, thank you, man. That's cool over there on the wall. All right, okay. Yeah, feel like I got time here, and I don't have any more video illustrations, so I'll make a live one here. All right, what do y'all think that is? It's not a cross.
It's like an intersection.
Oh, you guys are so good. It's an intersection. You're exactly right. And I'm going to put a little car here. Yeah, that's kind of... All right, we'll put some wheels on him here. And
Judge Judy.
oh, is that right? Okay. So I'm going to put a stop sign over there. You know what? I'm not going to put a stop sign there. Let's just... This little car, he needs a friend. We're going to put... Oh, there we are. And we'll put a little tree over here. No. Not everybody got the joke, did they? Okay, all right. Anyway, I'll erase the tree over here. All right, okay. All right. We're going to put a stoplight there. Now, okay. You guys, what is stop spelled backwards?
Pots.
Pots. Okay, say pots 5 times real fast.
Pots, 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 pots.
Okay, quick. What do you do when you come to a green light?
Go.
Oh, you guys are sharp. Okay, all right. Can't get one over on y'all. I'll just not try. Okay, all right. This little car, whenever that light's green, is going to do what? He's going to go. All right, so we're going to put another car over here. All right, it's a little harder for me to draw that car. I'll put a little person there driving him. Okay, there are actually 2 in the car. All right, so this light's green coming this way. So what's this guy got? It's red. You guys know good rules. Better than Noah was when he started driving. And so this person's going to do what here? Stop. He's going to stop. Okay. Well, this traffic light didn't have enough traffic, so we aren't going to do that anymore. It costs the city too much, and we're going to put a stop for way. Okay. Yeah, that is the word way right there. Okay, so we're going to put 4-way stop there. Now, this person came here, and this person came here, and this person is turning, let's see here, left. Okay, this person is turning left. So they both got there at the stoplight at the same time, so who goes first?
The car on the bottom.
All right, I'll take your, I always struggle with that. Here's what, come on through, guy, come on through. That's why I don't know what to do with you. Okay, all right, so, the rules are hard there, but let's do it like this, okay? Like, this car was already here, and then this car quickly comes up to the stoplight, the stop sign, who goes first then?
Green light.
But what? It's a stop. There's a stop sign here. It's a 4-way stop. The way I always do 4-way stops is that the one who got there first goes first. Okay, so whenever cars start backing up over here, and they start coming from all directions, it can get a little tricky. But basically, you try to watch who got there first, and then this line's got cars behind it, so you want to make sure that this guy doesn't go, because this guy went, this guy over here should go, and this guy should be next, and then this guy gets to go. And we all try to keep that in our mind. Well, this stoplight, finally, the city says, you know what? We're going to try something. We're going to, we believe, we trust our people. And we are going to remove the stop sign. And we're going to trust that the people are going to do the right thing. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's going to be a disaster.
I was thinking roundabout. That's what they've done.
We're seeing some roundabouts too. So those things confuse me. I don't know what to do at the roundabout either. But I'm just saying, okay, just think about this for a second. Let's think about us. Now, for the first time in my history of coming to this stoplight every single day to go to the work, I don't have to stop at this stoplight. I can go right on through. There's nothing telling me to stop. But what do you think Darren's going to do when he gets this stoplight? I'm sorry, this intersection. I'm going to stop. Why am I going to stop? A, because Darren could get hurt. The people in the car could get hurt. And it's possible if I go flying through that stop, somebody else might get hurt. So the best that I can do whenever I think about it is to do what's right, even though that sign wasn't there. I think I'm going to pause and see what's going on at this before I dart out in the road. I just want you to think about that for a second, because remember what it said about the law today? Paul made a statement here. Oh my goodness, Gina, I think I'm going to have to jump you ahead. To Galatians in chapter 3, verse 24 through 26. You guys know this statement. He's talking about the law. Did you find it? Okay. Therefore, the law has become our tutor, and you guys probably know it better as what? Schoolmaster, right? Has become our tutor or schoolmaster to lead us to Christ, that we may be justified by faith. But now that faith has come, we are no longer under a tutor, for you are all sons of God through faith in Jesus Christ. Obviously, my version got a little tangled right there, but that's the name for Jesus, I'm pretty well sure. All right. Now, let's go on. And I had to skip that verse right there. Okay. Does everybody agree that we're not under the old law? Okay. I'm not always comfortable. Well, some stuff, whenever it comes to this thing I'm talking about, I'm not always comfortable with everything. And I probably look like double standard in a lot of ways, because I still struggle. Whenever you grow up in something, it's kind of hard to get these things completely sorted out, and there are certain things that I still think about, and I might bring those in. But let's go to Luke chapter 4, and I want to get somebody to read verses 19 and 20. Okay.
To proclaim the favorable,
Something like the Spirit of the Lord.
proclaim the favorable year of the Lord. And he closed the book and gave it back to the attendant and sat down, and the eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed upon him.
I've got 19 and 20 down. Am I wrong, guys?
18 and 19 is the text you have, the reference.
Oh, okay. Well, that's my fault then. Let's do 18 and 19. Can we do that?
The Spirit of the Lord
Okay.
is upon me, because he anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set those free who are downtrodden, to proclaim the favorable year of the Lord.
All right. And would somebody read, now I've got it right, verses 20 through 21.
I got it.
Okay.
And he closed the book and he gave it again to the minister and sat down, and the eyes of all the people that were in the synagogue were fastened on him. And he began to say to them, this day is this scripture fulfilled in your hearing.
Okay. So Jesus said that what was fulfilled in their hearing? That scripture. And within that scripture, it said the favorable year of the Lord. Now, whenever I had no idea that right there was alluding to the year of Jubilee right there. That he was saying that was within him. Okay? So, Jesus was making some statements that's saying, I'm it. I'm the year of Jubilee. I'm the year of rest. I'm the year of redemption. When everything goes back. Whenever you're carrying that debt load that you don't know what to do with, within me, this is the favorable year of the Lord. This is huge. I mean, can you imagine at that time? And you can go back and check your resources, whatever, and you'll see that this is like a thing. And I didn't realize that. I mean, I should have known more about what the scripture was about there than what I did. But, I mean, can you imagine being somebody who is a Jew and you're laden with debt and the year of Jubilee comes? I mean, can you imagine? that this ought to be a time of joy for you. Thank goodness it's here. And I know they had rules and that kind of thing, but in all was the picture of this right here that's huge, of this redemption, this forgiveness that's taken place. And here, Jesus says that. Now, I want you to go. I know we're not pushing too bad. We're pushing pretty hard. All right, let's go here. Let's go here to one last verse. Let's go to Hebrews in chapter 4 and verse 3. And this is a great chapter to read about all these things, but anyway. And if somebody read that for us.
For we who have believed entered that rest, just as he has said, as I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest, although his works were finished from the foundation of the world.
Whenever you read that, it talks about rest right there. And ultimately, if you read that really close, for we who have believed enter that rest. Now, whenever we studied English in school, I didn't do very good. But I did know this. If you asked me a question in the 7th grade, maybe the 9th, I don't know. If you ask me, Darren, what are the English tenses? Why, there's a present tense, there's a past tense, and there's a future tense. So if you said to me, Darren, for we who have believed enter that rest, Darren, does that mean we're going to enter it in the future? Or does that mean something else? I would say, well, according to what best I can understand, we who have believed enter that rest. Yeah. Yeah, guys, there's something here for us to believe. That in Jesus Christ, He is our Sabbath rest. We enter that through faith. So, it's up to you and I. How much are you and I going to believe that Jesus really does forgive sins? I know we say it, but is there that one that you really got hung on to that you can't get past? That you're saying, I know, Paul makes a statement about the cross. And he says the cross is foolishness. Is that right? Who's it foolishness to? To those who are perishing. But what else does he say? To salvation? How much of it is foolishness to you? Well, the cross can save me from this, but I don't know about that. How far does it go before it's foolishness? How far is it before you say, I don't think that it's not good enough? It's foolishness. You see, what's scary is a lot of times we all find that place where we all say it's foolishness. When are we going to rest in what Jesus Christ has offered us versus trying to build up fences and build up walls to protect everything we've got and put a burden where He has put rest? You get what I'm saying? Okay, probably not. Okay. Guys, the Sabbath is a big fault. And honestly, that's where this starts with the 7 feasts. The first thing you're going to run onto is the Sabbath, and we're going to run onto a lot of them. We're going to see the Sabbath is not only kept on the Sabbath day, you're going to see there's other days that they keep the Sabbath. And those other days have complicated in how we understand things because we didn't understand there's this thing called high Sabbaths. So we'll try to understand that a little better. All right, guys, I think I'm near out of time. Jake, you want me to turn it back over to you?
If you want to, you can, or you can do whatever you want to do.
All right. Well, I'll turn it over to somebody else but Jake. Okay. I won't feel right if I don't let you close out, but I plan on being back here the rest of the week. I hope you guys, I hope it was okay. I hope it's something that you can take something home from and study and work through more and work through where you got issues with it. And then tomorrow night, we're going to take an overlook at all 7 feasts plus a couple of extra that are in there. And then we're going to try, I hope, to dive into Passover and get to take a good look at that before the night's over. So that's all I got to say, Jake. I'm going to turn it over to you.